I'm LitGirl66. Welcome to Introduction to World History. Today I have a secret to tell you, and I really hope that my high school teachers aren't listening to this because it means I know something bad about them. Around 1980, world history was made a mandate by the federal government. They decided because America was becoming a diverse place that perhaps it should be required to have world history taught in schools. Of course, they had Western civilization, but that didn't cover the entire world, did it? It only covered Western civilization, part of the world. So there was this gigantic fight inside the schools on who gets to teach world history. Was it the history professors, or was it the Western civilization professors? And genuinely, the history teachers were very determined that they would be the ones to teach it. So none of them had any idea on how to teach world history because none of them had taken it in school. So how should they be able to teach it if they hadn't really learned it? So they went to the colleges to ask people there to teach it to them. Of course, in colleges there was this idea that people placed their emphasis on one particular part of the world. So there might be somebody who was emphasizing on Japan, or another person who was emphasizing on China, or somebody who was emphasizing on Europe, or somebody who was emphasizing on America. But there wasn't really somebody who was doing world history. It wasn't taught in colleges either. It was like everybody knew a particular part of history, but they didn't quite know the entire thing. And when they all got together in these little meetings to decide what should be taught in world history, it was sort of like people were fighting to have their piece of history be the most meaningful part inside the teaching of world history. They felt, if they had Japan, they were going to have lots of Japan in that world history. Even though it necessarily did not belong there, it was felt that, by the people who were emphasizing on Japan, that should be a significant part. And just as it was felt by those who were doing Europe, that Europe should play the key narrative in the study of world history. But that couldn't be, we wanted a complete world history. And so colleges started getting professors together, and they would discuss these things, and they would teach high school teachers how to teach world history. So teachers who did not, university students who did not know, university professors who did not know anything about world history, who had not taken world history themselves or ever taught it themselves, were now teaching high school teachers how to teach students world history. So this entire phenomenon was really interesting. And it left this gigantic space for the textbook industry. They were like, now there was suddenly a market for world history textbooks. They were now supposed to produce world history textbooks because they were in demand and they were needed. So they pretty much got to decide inside the world history textbooks what belonged there and what didn't. At the beginning, what they started doing was they started taking the Western civilization textbooks, and they put a chapter on Japan, and a chapter on Asia, and a chapter on India, and a chapter on anything in particular, and then they called it world history because they had added those additional chapters. And that really wasn't very complete or efficient. Just as it wasn't efficient for the high school teachers to to be teaching world history, especially since they hadn't taken it themselves, and they didn't really have any prior knowledge to work off of. So normally when a teacher is given a textbook, they usually have on their particular subject area information that they can draw on to teach the subject more efficiently. They might be teaching the Civil War, and they might have, while they're reading the chapter on the Civil War that they're going to teach, they have prior knowledge about the Civil War that they learned in college and in high school. This was like non-existing in terms of world history. So in terms of the textbook industry, what happened was they grew more and more efficient at making these textbooks. So they figured out that they pretty much copied one another, and they decided what information went in, and they decided what information went out. They knew that they were mainly doing this toward the standardized test, so they knew sort of what information they would have to have in their textbooks, and they based it primarily on that, and they would copy from one another. They would look at what the other industry was doing, so that over the next 20 years, what pretty much happened was that all of the world history textbooks, even though it was such a new field at the time, were becoming sort of in sync with one another. They were having like a common line on what world history was. But it still leaves us this impression that the study of world history is actually a very recent one. And our understanding of world history is practically manufactured by these textbook industry companies who were forced to make these texts. And more importantly than that, it was sort of enforced by the government, and it shows the impact the government can have on schools, and the decisions that they make can have on what information we are learning. So I hope this has been slightly interesting, and I hope to see you soon. Bye!